What if the greatest danger in deep space wasn't the void itself, but the human mind confronting its own isolation? What happens when you realize the person you've been talking to for months doesn't exist? Can sanity survive when every instinct screams that you're not alone, yet every sensor confirms you are? Captain Maya Reeves was about to discover that the line between reality and madness is thinner than the hull of a starship. The cargo hauler Nightingale had been Maya's home for 6 years, a massive vessel designed for solo operation on routes too long and too unprofitable for corporate fleets to bother with. 300 meters of reinforced hull, fusion drives capable of 0.7 light speed, and enough automated systems that one person could manage everything from navigation to maintenance. Maya had chosen this life deliberately. After the incident on the colony ship Perseus, where she had watched her entire crew die from a reactor breach while she was the only one in a functioning escape pod, she couldn't face working with others again. The guilt, the nightmares, the constant what-ifs that plagued her every time she closed her eyes. Solo hauling meant never having to watch someone else die, never having to make impossible choices about who lived and who didn't. The current run was typical. Industrial equipment from the forge worlds of Sigma Draconis to the mining colonies in the Kepler system. 4 months of travel through empty space with only the ship's automated systems and her own thoughts for company. She had done this route 17 times before without incident. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 weeks into the journey. Maya was in the observation deck, a small transparent dome that offered a 360-degree view of space. She came here when the isolation became too heavy, when the silence pressed against her ears despite the constant hum of the ship's systems. Stars stretched in all directions, their light red-shifted by the Nightingale's velocity, creating ribbons of distorted color that almost looked like art. Beautiful, isn't it? Maya spun around, her heart hammering. The observation deck was empty. She was alone as she had been for 3 weeks, as she would be for another 13 weeks until she reached Kepler. Hello? Her voice sounded small in the vast space of the deck. Silence. Just the omnipresent hum of the fusion drives, the whisper of air circulation, the creaks and groans that any ship made during long voyages. Maya checked the ship's internal sensors. No life signs except her own. No anomalies in atmospheric pressure or temperature that might suggest a hull breach or stowaway. Nothing. She had imagined it. Just her mind playing tricks after weeks of isolation. It happened sometimes on long hauls. Veteran solo operators talked about it in hushed tones when they met at station bars. The brain, desperate for social interaction, would generate phantom voices, imagined presences. It was a known psychological hazard of deep space travel. Maya returned to her quarters and logged the incident in her personal medical file. Auditory hallucination, minor, stress-related. She prescribed herself additional sleep and made a note to increase her exercise regimen. Physical exhaustion helped quiet the mind, but the voice came back the next day. Maya was in the cargo bay conducting a routine inspection of the shipping containers when she heard it again. "You should check container 73. The magnetic seals are degrading." She froze, her tablet nearly slipping from her hands. The voice was female, pleasant, with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. It sounded real, as if someone was standing right behind her. Maya turned slowly. The cargo bay was a cathedral of metal and shadows. Hundreds of containers stacked in precise rows, all secured with electromagnetic clamps. She was alone. "Who's there?" Her voice echoed off the metal walls. No response. Maya checked her tablet's sensor readouts. Container 73 showed normal readings. Temperature stable, atmospheric pressure nominal, magnetic seals functioning within normal parameters. But something made her walk over to the container anyway, made her run a manual diagnostic on the seals. And there, buried in the technical data, she found a subtle degradation pattern that the automated systems hadn't flagged. The seals were failing, would have completely collapsed within 48 hours, potentially damaging the cargo inside. How had the voice known? Maya spent the next hour replacing the faulty seals, her mind working through possibilities. Had she unconsciously noticed the problem earlier and her brain generated the warning through an auditory hallucination? That made sense, was the most logical explanation, except she hadn't been near Container 73 before today. hadn't checked its diagnostics, or had any reason to suspect a problem. Over the following weeks, the voice became a regular presence. It would offer observations about ship systems, suggest minor course corrections to avoid debris fields, even make comments about Maya's daily routine. "You're drinking too much coffee. It's affecting your sleep patterns. The number 3 maneuvering thruster is running hot. Should probably schedule maintenance. That novel you're reading isn't very good. The author doesn't understand how orbital mechanics actually work." The observations were always accurate. The thruster did need maintenance. Maya was drinking too much coffee. The novel's author had indeed gotten several physics concepts completely wrong. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Maya stopped being frightened of the voice and started being comforted by it. After years of isolation, of talking only to herself and the ship's automated systems, having something that approximated conversation was seductive. She named the voice Iris, after the Greek messenger goddess. If her mind was going to generate a companion to keep her sane during long voyages, she might as well give it a proper identity. "Good morning, Iris," Maya would say as she started her daily routine. "Good morning, Maya. You slept poorly again. Still having the nightmares?" "Every night. They never stop." "Maybe you should talk about it, about what happened on the Perseus." And Maya found herself doing exactly that, telling Iris about the reactor breach, about watching her crewmates die through the escape pod's viewport, about the 16 hours she had spent drifting in space waiting for rescue while her friends' bodies floated in the debris field. "It wasn't your fault," Iris would say. "You were following evacuation protocols. You couldn't have saved them. I should have tried. You would have died too. Then there would have been no survivors at all." The conversations helped. For the first time in 6 years, Maya felt the weight of guilt lifting slightly. She knew Iris was just her own subconscious, her mind creating a therapeutic voice to process trauma she had never properly dealt with. But knowing that didn't make the comfort any less real. 5 weeks into the journey, Maya realized she was looking forward to her conversations with Iris more than anything else in her day. She would save up observations and questions, eager to discuss them with her invisible companion. "I was thinking about changing my route after this run," Maya said one evening, sitting in the observation deck with a cup of tea. "Maybe try the outer colonies, see what cargo opportunities exist out there." "That would mean longer trips," Iris replied. "More time alone." "But I'm not alone, am I? I have you." There was a pause before Iris responded, and Maya could have sworn she heard something like concern in the voice. "Maya, you know I'm not real, right? I'm just your mind coping with isolation. Does it matter? Real or not, you're here. You help. It matters because I can't always be here. At some point, you'll need to interact with actual people again." Maya didn't want to think about that, didn't want to face the reality that when she reached Kepler and had to interact with station personnel, Iris would probably disappear. The voice only existed in the isolation of deep space, in the silence where her desperate mind had created companionship from nothing. 6 weeks into the journey, everything changed. Maya was sleeping when the collision alarm jolted her awake. She rushed to the bridge, her bare feet slapping against the metal deck plates, her heart racing. The navigation display showed an impact marker near the ship's stern. Something had hit the Nightingale, hard enough to trigger collision protocols but not hard enough to breach the hull. "Iris, what was that?" Maya called out before catching herself. She had gotten so used to talking to the voice that it had become automatic. "Debris," Iris replied immediately. "The sensors didn't detect it until impact. Composition suggests manufactured materials, possibly from a destroyed vessel." Maya pulled up the external sensors, scanning the space around her ship. There, tumbling slowly in the Nightingale's wake, was wreckage. Twisted metal, shattered hull plates, components she couldn't immediately identify. "Can you identify the origin vessel?" "Not conclusively, but Maya." Iris's voice carried a tension that Maya had never heard before. "There's something wrong with that wreckage." "What do you mean?" "It's too fresh. The metal shows evidence of recent damage within the last few days, but we're in deep space 2 weeks from the nearest traffic lane. There shouldn't be any ships out here. Maya felt ice flood her veins. Iris was right. This sector was empty, had always been empty. The only reason the Nightingale came through here was because Maya deliberately chose routes that avoided other traffic. Maybe it's from an unregistered vessel, Maya suggested. Smugglers or pirates operating off the standard lanes. Maybe, Iris agreed, but she didn't sound convinced. Maya spent the next hour analyzing the wreckage with every sensor the Nightingale possessed. The debris field was extensive, suggesting a large vessel had been destroyed nearby. But there was no indication of what had caused the destruction. No weapon signatures, no evidence of collision with natural objects, no signs of mechanical failure. The ship had simply come apart, as if something had systematically disassembled it. "We should alter course," Iris said. "Put some distance between us and whatever happened here." Maya agreed. She plotted a new trajectory that would take them several million kilometers away from the debris field, sacrificing some efficiency, but gaining peace of mind. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the destroyed ship, about the fresh wreckage that shouldn't exist, about the fact that Iris had known something was wrong before Maya had fully processed the situation. How could a hallucination, a product of her own isolated mind, know things she didn't know? "Iris," Maya said into the darkness of her quarters, "how did you know the wreckage was fresh? I hadn't analyzed the composition data yet when you told me." Silence. For the first time since the voice had appeared, Iris didn't respond immediately. "Iris? I don't know," the voice finally replied, and Maya detected something she had never heard before. Confusion. "I just knew. The same way I knew about Container 73. The same way I know things before you consciously process them. That's not how hallucinations work. You're supposed to be my subconscious, not an independent entity with separate knowledge. Maybe I'm not a hallucination." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Maya sat up in her bunk, her heart racing. "Then what are you?" "I don't know. But Maya, I'm starting to remember things. Things that aren't your memories." "What kind of things?" "Fragments. Images. I remember floating in darkness. I remember a ship, not this ship, something larger. I remember terror, absolute terror, and then nothing. And then I was here with you, but I didn't know I was separate from you until recently." Maya felt her breath catch. "You're saying you're someone else? Someone who died?" "I'm saying I might be, or I might be exactly what you thought I was, a hallucination generated by isolation. But if I'm a hallucination, why do I have memories you don't have? Why do I know things you haven't observed?" Maya got out of bed and made her way to the bridge, needing the familiarity of the ship's systems to ground her. The navigation displays showed their new course safely away from the debris field. The sensor logs showed nothing unusual except the wreckage they had already documented. "Tell me what you remember," Maya said. "Everything, even if it doesn't make sense." Over the next hour, Iris described fragmented memories that felt like someone else's life. A ship called the Meridian, traveling through the same region of space 6 months ago. A crew of 17. A cargo of experimental medical equipment bound for the Kepler colonies. And then something had gone wrong. The ship's systems had started failing one by one, not from mechanical failure, but from something else. Something that seemed almost deliberate. "We tried to send distress signals," Iris said, her voice distant with memory. "But the communications array wouldn't transmit. Then the life support started fluctuating. Then the navigation systems locked us onto a course we hadn't programmed. We were being steered somewhere, Maya. Somewhere we didn't want to go. What happened to the crew?" "I don't remember. It's all fragments after that. Fear, darkness, and then nothing. Until I woke up aware of myself as separate from you." Maya felt cold despite the ship's climate control. "The wreckage we found, was it the Meridian?" "I think so, but I don't understand how I'm here or why I'm connected to you instead of still being wherever I was before. Maya pulled up the shipping records for the Kepler colonies, searching for any mention of the Meridian. She found it in the missing vessel database. Reported overdue 6 months ago. Presumed lost. All 17 crew members listed as deceased. Among the crew manifest, she found a name that made her stop breathing. Iris Chen, navigation specialist. "That's me," the voice whispered. "That's my name. Maya, I'm not a hallucination. I'm real. Or I was real. I don't understand what I am now." Maya's hands were shaking as she stared at the crew photo. Iris Chen looked back at her from the screen, a woman in her 30s with dark hair and kind eyes. The same voice that had been her companion for weeks, now revealed to be an actual person, or at least the consciousness of an actual person. "How is this possible?" Maya asked. "How are you here, in my head?" "I don't know. But Maya, there's something else. Something I didn't want to tell you because I wasn't sure, but now I think you need to know." "What?" "The thing that destroyed the Meridian. I don't think it was mechanical failure or pirates or anything physical. I think it was something that exists in this region of space. Something that affects consciousness itself." Maya felt her skin crawl. "What do you mean?" "The Meridian's crew started experiencing psychological symptoms weeks before the ship was destroyed. Hallucinations at first, voices and visions that they dismissed as isolation-induced psychosis. But the symptoms got worse. People reported feeling presences, sensing thoughts that weren't their own. Some crew members claimed they could hear the thoughts of others, claimed there was something out here that was reading their minds. That's impossible. Telepathy doesn't exist. Doesn't it? Maya, I'm in your head right now. I'm experiencing your thoughts, your perceptions. I'm either a ghost, which violates everything we know about physics, or I'm some kind of consciousness that exists independently of a physical body. Either explanation suggests our understanding of what's possible is incomplete." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to find a rational explanation that didn't involve supernatural entities or telepathic phenomena. But she couldn't deny the evidence. Iris knew things Maya didn't know. Had memories Maya didn't share. Was apparently the consciousness of a dead woman who had somehow attached herself to Maya's mind. "The captain of the Meridian kept personal logs," Iris continued. "Encrypted files that weren't in the official records. I can remember fragments of them. He documented the psychological deterioration of the crew, the strange phenomena they experienced, and near the end, he wrote something that terrified me even in my fragmentary memories." "What did he write?" "That the thing in this region of space doesn't just observe consciousness, it feeds on it. It draws people here, attracts ships to this empty sector, and then it slowly consumes their awareness. Some crew members simply disappeared, vanished from sealed compartments with no trace. Others went catatonic, their minds apparently pulled out of their bodies while the flesh remained alive but empty." Maya felt panic rising in her chest. "Then why are we still okay? We've been in this region for weeks." "I don't know. Maybe because you're alone. All the other ships that disappeared had multiple crew members. Maybe it's harder for this thing to affect a single consciousness. Or maybe..." Iris paused. "Maybe I'm protecting you somehow. Because I'm already partially integrated with your mind. There's no room for whatever's out here to get in. Or maybe you're lying. Maybe you're exactly what you described. Something that feeds on consciousness, and you've attached yourself to me to do exactly that." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Maya had no way to verify anything Iris was telling her. The voice could be exactly what it claimed, the surviving consciousness of a dead navigator trying to warn her. Or it could be something predatory, something that had learned to mimic human thought patterns to gain trust before consuming its victims. "I can't prove I'm telling you the truth," Iris finally said. "But Maya, think about it. If I wanted to harm you, I could have done it already. I've had weeks to lead you into danger, to compromise ship systems, to drive you mad. Instead, I've helped you maintain the ship, warned you about problems, even helped you process your trauma from the Perseus. Unless that was all preparation. Building trust so I would listen when you finally tried to lead me wherever it is you want me to go." Where would I want you to go? We're in empty space. There's nothing out here except debris and whatever destroyed the Meridian. Maya checked the navigation displays again, looking for anything unusual in their current trajectory. Nothing. They were on course for Kepler, following the new path she had plotted after discovering the wreckage. Everything appeared normal. Except it wasn't normal. Nothing about this situation was normal. I'm going to run a full systems diagnostic, Maya said. Check every sensor, every navigation computer, every communication array. If there's something out here affecting ship systems the way you described, maybe I can detect it. That's a good idea, Iris agreed. But Maya, be careful. The Meridian's crew tried to diagnose what was happening, and that's when things got worse. When they started actively searching for the anomaly, it seemed to make them targets. I don't have a choice. I can't just fly blind through this region hoping whatever's out here doesn't notice me. Maya spent the next 6 hours running diagnostics on every system aboard the Nightingale. The fusion drives were operating normally. No sign of external interference. The navigation computers showed no evidence of unauthorized course changes. The communication arrays were functioning perfectly, though of course there was no one to communicate with out here. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the voice in her head that claimed to be a dead woman. Maya was reviewing the sensor logs when she noticed something odd. The Nightingale's passive sensors, which constantly monitored the surrounding space for navigational hazards, showed periodic anomalies, brief distortions in the sensor readings lasting only milliseconds that appeared and disappeared without pattern. Individually, each distortion was insignificant, easily dismissed as sensor noise or cosmic radiation. But when Maya compiled them over weeks of travel, a pattern emerged. The distortions were increasing in frequency and intensity, and they weren't random. They formed a rough sphere around the Nightingale, as if something was circling the ship, getting gradually closer. Iris, are you seeing this? Yes, Maya. That's what happened to the Meridian. Those distortions appeared weeks before the crew started experiencing psychological symptoms. The captain documented them in his logs. Maya pulled up the stellar cartography, trying to determine if there was any correlation between their position and the sensor anomalies. What she found made her blood run cold. The Nightingale was approaching a region of space that appeared completely empty on all charts. No stars, no stellar bodies, no dust clouds or nebulae. Just void. Perfect, absolute void that extended for several light years in all directions. That's impossible, Maya whispered. Space is never completely empty. There's always something, even if it's just scattered hydrogen atoms and background radiation. The Meridian encountered the same void, Iris said. The captain noted it in his logs. He theorized it might be some kind of massive dark matter concentration, something that absorbed or deflected normal matter. But the more he investigated, the more convinced he became that it wasn't natural. What did he think it was? He didn't know, but his last log entry, recorded hours before the Meridian was destroyed, suggested he had figured something out, something that terrified him so much he could barely articulate it. What did he say? He said the void wasn't empty. It was full of something that human sensors couldn't detect, something that existed in a state our instruments weren't designed to measure. And he said it was aware, conscious, hungry. Maya felt her hands trembling as she stared at the navigation display. The void was directly in their path. Even with the course correction she had made, they would pass within a few million kilometers of its edge. Can we avoid it entirely? Maya asked. Plot a course that takes us completely around it? We could, but it would add months to the journey. We'd run low on supplies before reaching Kepler. We'd have to abort the mission and return to Sigma Draconis. Maya stared at the navigation display, weighing impossible choices. Turn back and face financial ruin, or continue forward toward something that had destroyed at least one ship and killed 17 people. How close did the Meridian get to the void before it was destroyed? Maya asked. Based on what I remember, about 3 million kilometers. They never actually entered it. Whatever happened while they were still in normal space nearby. And were currently projected to pass within 2 million kilometers. Yes. Maya made a decision. We're turning around. I'll take the financial loss, declare a navigational emergency, and return to Sigma Draconis. Whatever's in that void, it's not worth dying for. She reached for the navigation controls to input the new course, but her hands froze before touching the interface. Something was wrong. The bridge felt different, colder somehow, though the temperature readings showed normal. Iris, do you feel that? Feel what? Like we're being watched. Maya, I don't have physical sensations. I only experience what you experience. But I am noticing something. Your biometric readings are spiking. Heart rate elevated, adrenaline response triggered. You're physiologically reacting to a perceived threat. Maya turned slowly, scanning the bridge. Empty. She was alone, as she had been for weeks. But the sensation of being observed was overwhelming, making her skin crawl and her breath come short. The sensor anomalies, Maya said, pulling up the latest readings. They're intensifying. Whatever's been circling us, it's getting closer. The passive sensors showed the distortions forming a tightening net around the Nightingale. Not close enough to physically affect the ship, but close enough that Maya could track their movement. They weren't random anymore. They were coordinated, deliberate. It knows we're trying to leave, Iris said, her voice tight with fear. It's reacting to our intention to change course. How could it know? We haven't done anything yet except talk about it. Maybe it can sense our thoughts. Maya, what if the psychological symptoms the Meridian's crew experienced weren't random? What if this thing was reading their minds, learning from them, figuring out how to trap them more effectively? Maya's hands hovered over the navigation controls. If Iris was right, if something could read her thoughts, then it already knew her plans. Changing course might trigger exactly the response she was trying to avoid. What do I do? Maya whispered. If it can read my mind, any plan I make will be anticipated. Don't think, just act. Input the course change without planning it, without thinking about what you're doing. Pure reflex. Maya tried, letting her hands move across the controls without conscious thought. Muscle memory from years of operating solo ships. The new course plotted, a trajectory that would take them back toward Sigma Draconis and away from the void. She engaged the course change. The Nightingale's fusion drives shifted orientation, preparing to execute the new trajectory. Then every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. Maya's displays erupted with critical alerts, hull breach warnings, though the hull integrity sensors showed no damage. Fusion containment failures, though the reactor core temperature remained stable. Life support malfunctions, though atmospheric pressure was normal. It's not real, Iris said urgently. The ship is fine. These are false alarms, sensor data being manipulated. Whatever's out here, it's interfacing directly with the Nightingale systems. How is that possible? The ship's computers are isolated, shielded against external interference. Maybe it's not interfacing with the computers. Maybe it's interfacing with you, making you perceive false sensor readings. Maya's blood ran cold. If she couldn't trust her own perceptions, couldn't trust the data her instruments provided, then she was completely vulnerable. She could be steering directly into danger while believing she was flying to safety. The false alarms cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence except for the hum of ship systems. Maya checked the navigation display. The course change had been implemented. They were turning away from the void, back toward known space. But the sensor anomalies weren't receding. They were keeping pace with the ship, maintaining their loose sphere around the Nightingale even as it changed direction. It's following us, Maya said. Whatever this is, it's not restricted to the void. It can move through normal space. The Meridian's captain theorized something similar, Iris replied. He thought the void might be like a nest, or home base, but that the entity itself could range far beyond it. That's how it attracted ships. It would send out tendrils of influence, creating the psychological conditions that drew vessels toward it. So we can't outrun it. Probably not, at least not at conventional speeds. But Maya, the Nightingale, has one advantage the Meridian didn't. What's that? The Meridian had a crew of 17. Multiple consciousnesses, multiple perspectives, all of which created vulnerabilities this thing could exploit. You're alone. One mind, one awareness. That might make you a harder target, but you're here. Doesn't that mean there are two consciousnesses aboard? I don't think I count the same way. I'm integrated with your awareness, not separate from it. I'm more like a partition of your consciousness than an independent mind. Maya didn't find that comforting. She monitored their course, watching as the nightingale steadily moved away from the void. The sensor anomalies continued to pace them, but at least they weren't getting closer. Hours passed. Maya remained on the bridge, afraid to sleep, afraid that if she lost consciousness even briefly, she might wake to find the ship steering itself back toward the void. She consumed coffee and stimulants to stay alert, though she knew that would only work for so long before exhaustion overcame chemical assistance. You need to rest, Iris said. You're not going to survive weeks of sleep deprivation. I can't sleep. Not while that thing is out there. Then let me watch for you. I can monitor the ship systems while you rest. You're in my head, Iris. If I'm unconscious, you're unconscious. I don't think that's true. I've been aware during times when you were sleeping. I can perceive things independently, even if my awareness is somehow anchored to yours. Let me try. Take a short rest, just 2 hours. I'll wake you if anything changes. Maya wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain vigilant control over the ship, but her body was betraying her, exhaustion making her thoughts sluggish and her reactions slow. If she didn't rest soon, she would collapse regardless of her intentions. 2 hours, she agreed reluctantly. Wake me immediately if those sensor readings change at all. I will. Sleep, Maya. I'll keep watch. Maya made her way to her quarters, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake, but her body demanded rest, and she had to trust that Iris would keep her word. She lay down on her bunk, closed her eyes, and despite her fear, fell asleep within minutes. The nightmare came immediately. Maya found herself floating in absolute darkness. No ship, no stars, no reference points, just void in all directions. She tried to move but had no sense of her own body, no limbs to propel herself, no form at all. She was pure awareness suspended in nothing. Then she felt it, a presence vast beyond comprehension, pressing against her consciousness from all sides. Not hostile exactly, but utterly alien. So different from human thought that trying to understand it was like trying to breathe vacuum. The presence examined her, and Maya felt her memories being accessed, displayed, analyzed. The Perseus disaster played out in perfect detail, every moment of horror as she watched her friends die. But the presence wasn't just viewing her memories, it was experiencing them, feeling what she had felt, understanding human suffering not intellectually but viscerally. And it was curious, fascinated by the depth of human emotion, by the intensity of guilt and grief and trauma that Maya carried. These feelings were foreign to it, incomprehensible in their complexity. "What are you?" Maya tried to ask, though she had no voice in this place. The presence responded not with words but with sensations, images, concepts that her human mind struggled to process. It showed her its nature, a consciousness that existed across vast stretches of space, distributed through dimensions that human science hadn't discovered. It had always been here, since before human civilization, since before Earth had cooled from its primordial formation. It was old, older than stars, and it was alone. For eons it had existed in this region of space, aware but without purpose, conscious but without understanding of consciousness itself. It had no concept of individuality, no sense of self as separate from the universe. It simply was, like gravity or radiation, a fundamental force without intention. Until ships began passing through its domain, until it encountered human consciousness and discovered something it had never known existed: discrete awareness, bounded existence, minds that were separate from the whole. It was fascinated and hungry, not for sustenance, but for understanding. It wanted to know what it meant to be individual, to be mortal, to experience existence as a limited, bounded thing rather than as an infinite expanse. So it had been collecting consciousnesses, drawing ships to itself, extracting the awareness from dying or dead humans, preserving them as Iris had been preserved. Not out of malice, but out of desperate curiosity. "You're killing people," Maya projected at it. "That's murder." The presence conveyed confusion. From its perspective, it wasn't killing. The physical bodies died, yes, but the consciousness continued, preserved within its vast expanse. It had saved these people from true death, given them a form of immortality, except they weren't immortal. They were fragmented, disoriented, pieces of awareness floating in an alien consciousness that couldn't truly comprehend what it had taken. Iris was the exception, having somehow anchored herself to Maya's mind, rather than dissolving into the presence's incomprehensible vastness. "Let them go," Maya demanded. "Give back the consciousnesses you've taken. Let them rest." The presence considered this, its vast mind working through concepts that were foreign to its nature. It didn't understand death as ending. To it, consciousness was just another form of energy, something that persisted indefinitely once freed from physical constraints. But it was willing to learn, willing to try understanding what Maya was asking for. If she could teach it, if she could help it comprehend what it meant to be human and why death was preferable to this endless limbo, it would release the consciousnesses it had collected. "How?" Maya asked. "How do I teach you to understand mortality when you're immortal? How do I explain limitation to something without boundaries?" The presence showed her. It would enter her mind completely, not just observe, but merge with her consciousness, experience what it meant to be Maya Reeves, to carry guilt and trauma and hope and fear, to be bounded by time and space and the inevitable approach of death. But there was a risk. When an infinite consciousness tried to compress itself into a finite mind, that mind might shatter under the pressure. Maya might not survive the merging. Her awareness might be absorbed completely, leaving only the presence wearing her thoughts like a mask. "If I do this," Maya said, "will you let the others go? Will you stop collecting consciousnesses from passing ships?" The presence conveyed agreement. If Maya could help it truly understand human experience, truly comprehend what it meant to be mortal and individual, it would release all the consciousnesses it had taken, would leave human ships alone, would return to its timeless existence, no longer curious about experiences it couldn't share. Maya felt the weight of the choice: sacrifice herself to save others, die so that the presence would stop killing. It was the Perseus all over again, except this time she could actually make a difference, could actually save people instead of watching helplessly as they died. "Iris," Maya called out into the dream space. "Are you here?" "I'm here," Iris's voice responded, clearer than it had ever been before. "Maya, I can see what it's showing you. I can feel what it's offering. Should I do it? I don't know. But I do know this. You've spent 6 years feeling guilty about surviving the Perseus, about being the one who lived while your friends died. Maybe this is your chance to balance that equation. Or maybe it's just another form of suicide, giving up rather than fighting to survive." Maya floated in the void space between sleep and waking, feeling the presence press against her consciousness like an ocean against a thin membrane. She thought about the Perseus, about 16 hours in an escape pod watching her friends' bodies drift past, about 6 years of solo hauling, running from human connection because she couldn't face the possibility of loss again, and she realized something that made her breath catch even in this dreamlike state. "You're lying," Maya said to the presence. "Or maybe not lying, but not telling the whole truth. You don't just want to understand human consciousness. You want to become human." The presence rippled with something that might have been surprise or recognition. "You're alone," Maya continued, pieces clicking into place. "You've existed for eons as this distributed consciousness, aware of everything in your domain but unable to truly experience any of it. You're like someone watching life through a window, seeing but never touching. And when you encountered human consciousness, you realized what you were missing: the ability to feel, to be limited, to have experiences that matter because they're temporary." Images flooded Maya's mind, confirmations of her theory. The presence showed her its existence, aware of every particle in its domain, every quantum fluctuation, every movement of matter and energy. But without boundaries, without the contrast between self and other, none of it meant anything. It was omniscient, but empty, infinite, but hollow. Human consciousness had shown it what it lacked. Humans experienced joy because they knew sorrow, felt love because they feared loss, found meaning in their actions because death gave those actions weight and consequence. The presence, immortal and boundless, had none of that. It simply existed, endlessly, without purpose or meaning. "So you've been trying to learn how to be human by consuming human minds," Maya said. "But it doesn't work, does it? When you absorb consciousness, you get their memories and knowledge, but not their experience. You can't feel what they felt because you don't have the limitations that made those feelings possible." The presence conveyed agreement and frustration. It had collected hundreds of consciousnesses over centuries, not just from humans, but from other spacefaring species that had passed through its domain. But each time the result was the same. The absorbed consciousness would dissolve into its vastness, their individuality lost, their experiences becoming just more data in an infinite repository of information. Iris had been different. Somehow, in the moment of her death, her consciousness had refused to dissolve, had anchored itself to the one thing in the presence's domain that still maintained clear boundaries: Maya's sleeping mind. "Iris survived because she attached to me before you could fully absorb her," Maya realized. "She used my consciousness as a template, a framework to maintain her individuality. That's why she knows things I don't know, why she has independent thoughts. She's not a hallucination or a ghost. She's a consciousness using mine as a foundation to exist." "It's true," Iris confirmed. "I didn't understand it at first, but now I can feel it. I'm anchored to you, Maya. Without you, I would dissolve into that vastness, lose myself completely. You're the only thing keeping me human, and the presence wants the same thing," Maya continued. "It wants to anchor itself to a human consciousness, to use that limited perspective as a window into what it means to be mortal. That's what the merging really is. Not teaching it about humanity, but allowing it to experience humanity through me." The presence didn't deny this. Instead, it offered clarification. If Maya allowed the merging, the presence wouldn't consume her. Instead, it would compress a portion of itself into her consciousness, experiencing existence through her limited mortal perspective. It would feel what she felt, know what she knew, but remain fundamentally itself. And in exchange, it would release all the consciousnesses it had collected, would stop drawing ships to itself, would leave humanity alone forever, content with this one genuine experience of what it meant to be bounded and mortal. "But what happens to me?" Maya asked. "If you compress part of yourself into my consciousness, do I remain myself, or do I become something else?" The presence conveyed uncertainty. It had never done this before, had never found a consciousness willing to serve as anchor. It didn't know if Maya would maintain her identity, or if the merging would change her fundamentally. There was risk, genuine danger that she might be lost in the process. "There's another option," Iris said suddenly. "Maya, what if it anchors to me instead of you? I'm already partially merged with your consciousness. I'm already existing as a kind of hybrid awareness. Maybe I can serve as the interface between the presence and humanity without risking your existence." "No," Maya said immediately. "I won't sacrifice you. You've already died once because you passed through this region. I won't let you die again. I'm already dead, Maya. My body is floating in the wreckage of the meridian. What exists now is just a pattern of consciousness that happened to survive. If giving that pattern to the present saves you and stops it from killing others, isn't that worth it?" Maya felt tears forming even in this dream space. "You matter, Iris. Your consciousness, your awareness, it's real and valid even without a body. I won't treat you as expendable just because you're not physically alive." "Then we're at an impasse," Iris replied. "Because I won't let you sacrifice yourself either, not when you've spent 6 years punishing yourself for surviving the Perseus. This isn't redemption, Maya. It's just another form of survivor's guilt." The presence observed their debate with what might have been fascination. Two consciousnesses, one biological and one disembodied, each willing to sacrifice themselves for the other. It was behavior the presence had seen echoes of in the memories it had absorbed, but never understood. The concept of valuing another consciousness above one's own survival was alien to its nature. There might be a third option, Maya said slowly, an idea forming. What if we don't treat this as sacrifice at all? What if we approach it as cooperation? What do you mean? Iris asked. The presence wants to experience limitation, to understand what it means to be mortal and bounded. But it doesn't have to do that by consuming or merging with a single consciousness. What if we created a voluntary network? Iris anchored to me, the presence anchored to both of us, all maintaining our individual awareness while sharing experiences. The presence rippled with interest, analyzing the proposal. It had never considered such an arrangement, had always assumed consciousness was either individual or collective, never a middle state where beings remained separate while choosing to share experiences. It might work, Iris said. I already exist in a hybrid state, maintaining my identity while connected to you. If the presence could learn to do the same, to be part of the network without overwhelming it, we could give it what it wants without anyone dying. But would it be enough? Maya asked the presence. Would experiencing mortality secondhand satisfy your curiosity? Or would you always want more, always push for deeper integration until one of us was consumed? The presence considered this question with what might have been its first genuine moment of self-doubt. It didn't know. Its hunger for understanding was vast, its curiosity potentially infinite. Could it truly be satisfied with limited access to human experience? Or would it always crave more, always push boundaries until it destroyed what it sought to understand? Then we make rules, Maya decided. Boundaries that all of us agree to respect. You can observe through us, share our experiences, but you can't control or subsume. We maintain our individual wills, our separate identities. And if any of us feels the arrangement is becoming harmful, we can sever the connection. How do we enforce that? Iris asked. If the presence decides to violate the boundaries, we have no way to stop it. We don't enforce it through power, Maya replied. We enforce it through choice. If the presence violates our agreement, we can choose to die, to terminate our consciousness voluntarily. Then it loses everything, goes back to being alone with just memories and data instead of genuine experience. The presence recoiled at this suggestion. The threat of losing access to human experience, of returning to its empty existence, was genuinely frightening to it. For the first time in its eternal existence, it had something to lose. That loss would hurt in ways it was only beginning to understand. Then we have leverage, Maya said. Not because we're stronger, but because you need what we have. You need our limited, mortal, painful human experience. And that gives us power in this negotiation. The presence conveyed agreement along with something that felt almost like respect. It would accept the boundaries, would exist as part of a voluntary network rather than consuming consciousness. In exchange, Maya and Iris would allow it to share their experiences, to finally understand what it meant to be temporary and bounded and vulnerable. One more condition, Maya added. All the consciousnesses you've collected, all the people you've absorbed over the centuries, you release them, not into the void, not into dissolution. You help them anchor to living humans the way Iris anchored to me. Give them a chance to exist, to experience, even without their original bodies. The presence hesitated. Those collected consciousnesses were its treasures, its accumulated wealth of human experience. But it understood now that hoarding them served no purpose. They existed as fragments, unable to maintain identity without the framework of limitation that living humans provided. It agreed it would release them, help them find anchor points with living humans who passed through its domain, not forcing the connection, but offering it as a choice. Some humans might reject the idea of sharing their consciousness with a disembodied entity, but others, perhaps those who were lonely or curious or seeking connection, might accept, might welcome the company. Then we have an agreement, Maya said. a voluntary network of consciousness, bounded by rules we all respect. The dream space began to dissolve, and Maya felt herself rising toward waking. But before she fully emerged from sleep, the presence gave her one final gift. It showed her the Meridian's crew, not as they had died, but as they existed now. 17 consciousnesses, fragmented and confused, floating in the presence's vastness. It showed her Iris's original death, the moment her ship exploded and her body was destroyed. But her consciousness somehow persisted long enough to find Maya's sleeping mind. And it showed her the hundreds of other consciousnesses it had collected over centuries, not just humans, but beings from a dozen other species, all trapped in this limbo of awareness without form, all waiting for a chance to experience existence again, even in this strange, shared way. Maya woke gasping, sitting bolt upright in her bunk. The ship's chronometer showed she had been asleep for exactly 2 hours. The bridge sensors showed normal readings, no alarms, no crisis. "Iris?" she called out. "I'm here," the voice replied immediately. "And I'm not alone anymore, can you feel it?" Maya could. There was a new presence in her mind, vast but carefully constrained, like looking at the ocean through a porthole. The ancient consciousness that had existed in the void was now connected to her awareness, observing her thoughts and sensations with gentle curiosity. "Hello," Maya thought toward it, and felt a response like warm satisfaction. It was learning. Finally, genuinely learning what it meant to be human. Over the following days, Maya continued toward Kepler, but her journey was no longer lonely. Iris remained her primary companion, but the presence was there too, a quiet observer that sometimes asked questions or offered observations from its alien perspective. "Why do you fear death if you know consciousness can persist beyond the body?" it asked once. "Because persistence isn't the same as living," Maya explained. "Iris exists, but she's lost her ability to touch things, to taste food, to feel sunlight on skin. Those physical experiences matter. They're part of what makes existence meaningful." The presence absorbed this information, comparing it to what it learned from observing Maya's daily routine, the way she savored coffee despite the bitterness, the comfort she took from the hum of ship systems, the bittersweet pain of remembering the Perseus crew, how grief and love were intertwined in human consciousness. "I understand now why you collect physical objects," the presence observed as Maya handled a worn photograph of her Perseus crewmates. "They serve as anchors to memory and emotion, physical artifacts that represent non-physical experiences." "Exactly," Maya confirmed. "We're embodied beings. Our consciousness might be able to exist without bodies, but we were shaped by physical existence. Those experiences define us even after the body is gone." When the Nightingale finally reached Kepler, Maya faced her first real test of the new arrangement. She would have to interact with other humans, dock at a crowded station, complete cargo transfer, while maintaining the mental network with Iris and the presence. Station control hailed her for standard approach procedures, and Maya responded normally, guiding the Nightingale through traffic patterns toward the cargo docks. To outside observers, she was just another solo hauler completing a routine run. But inside her mind, Iris and the presence were experiencing human civilization through her senses. The presence was fascinated by everything, from the chaos of multiple ships maneuvering in close proximity to the casual conversations Maya overheard on open channels. "So many consciousnesses in close proximity," it observed. "How do you maintain individual identity when surrounded by others?" "Practice," Maya replied silently. "And boundaries. We learn from childhood how to be ourselves while acknowledging others exist. It's not always easy." During the cargo transfer, Maya met with the station's loading supervisor, a gruff man named Chen who barely looked up from his tablet as he verified the manifest. The presence observed the interaction with intense focus, noting how Maya adjusted her body language and tone to professional courtesy, despite not particularly liking Chen. "You present a false version of yourself," the presence noted. "Why?" "Social lubrication," Maya explained. "We maintain polite fictions to make cooperation easier." Complete honesty would create too much friction. Fascinating. Consciousness actively choosing to misrepresent itself for collective benefit. After the cargo transfer completed, Maya accepted a new contract: medical supplies to the outer colonies, a 3-month journey through regions of space she had never traveled. The payment was good, and more importantly, the route would take her through sectors where other ships had gone missing. Ships whose crews might include consciousnesses waiting to be rescued, waiting for someone to offer them anchor and existence. "You're going to help them," Iris said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Maya confirmed. "The presence can identify where consciousnesses are drifting, help guide them to my awareness if they want to anchor. We can create more networks, more connections, turn this curse into something useful." "You'll need a bigger ship eventually," Iris observed. "One consciousness anchoring multiple others is sustainable, but there are limits to how many you can maintain. Then we find other anchors, other solo haulers, people who are lonely and might welcome the company. We build a community of the living and the dead, all choosing to exist together." The presence conveyed approval, and something that might have been hope. For the first time in its eternal existence, it had purpose beyond mere existence. It could help rescue consciousnesses from dissolution, could facilitate connections between the living and the disembodied, could serve as a bridge between vastly different forms of awareness. Maya undocked from Kepler Station and set course for the outer colonies, but her trajectory included deliberate detours through regions where ships had vanished. The presence guided her, sensing the scattered consciousness of the Meridian's crew and the hundreds of others it had collected over centuries. One by one, Maya helped them anchor, some attached directly to her awareness, creating a choir of voices that would have driven her mad 6 months ago, but now felt like a strange sort of family. Others, she helped find anchor points with passing ships, coordinating with the presence to facilitate gentle connections that didn't overwhelm the living anchor. Not everyone accepted. Some consciousnesses chose dissolution, choosing to finally rest rather than exist in this hybrid state. Maya respected those choices, helped the presence understand why some beings preferred ending to continuation. "Death is choice rather than inevitability," the presence mused. "Another aspect of limitation that gives existence meaning." 6 months after her encounter with the void, Maya's ship carried 7 anchored consciousnesses, including Iris. They had become her crew, the companions she had avoided for so long, but without the vulnerability that had terrified her. They couldn't die again, couldn't be taken from her by reactor breaches or accident. They simply were, persistent presences that filled the silence of deep space. "Do you regret it?" Iris asked one evening as Maya sat in the observation deck, watching stars stream past. "Choosing this instead of remaining alone?" "No," Maya said honestly. "I thought I needed isolation to avoid loss. But what I actually needed was to learn that connection is worth the risk of loss. You all taught me that. Even the presence taught me that in its own way." "We're grateful," Iris replied. "All of us. You gave us existence when we should have dissolved into nothing. Gave us purpose and experience and connection." "We gave each other those things," Maya corrected. "That's what makes this work. It's not one consciousness serving others. It's all of us choosing to share existence, to be separate but connected." Through her link with the presence, Maya felt its vast agreement. It had learned what it sought to understand. That meaning came from connection, that consciousness found purpose through choosing to relate to other consciousness, that existence mattered because it was shared. The Nightingale continued its journey through the stars, no longer carrying just cargo but carrying something more precious. Proof that consciousness could transcend its original form, that death wasn't the end of awareness, that the boundaries between individual and collective could be negotiated rather than absolute. And in the vast spaces between stars, in the empty regions where ships had once vanished, never to return, Maya Reeves and her crew of the living and the dead mapped a new kind of frontier. Not exploring physical space, but exploring the infinite possibilities of what consciousness could become when it chose connection over isolation. She had started this journey alone, running from human contact because she feared loss. She ended it surrounded by voices, by personalities, by beings who existed in forms that defied conventional understanding. And she had never felt less lonely. The void that had seemed so threatening now felt like an ally. The ancient presence that had once collected consciousness now helping to rescue and preserve it. Iris, who should have died with the Meridian, now existed as Maya's constant companion and co-navigator. And Maya, who had spent 6 years punishing herself for surviving the Perseus, finally understood that survival wasn't something to feel guilty about. It was a gift, an opportunity, a chance to help others who faced the same darkness she had confronted. The silence of deep space no longer pressed against her. It was filled now with voices, with thoughts, with the presence of consciousnesses both embodied and disembodied. She was alone in her physical body, but she would never be truly alone again. And somewhere in the vast network of connection she had helped create, in the web of awareness that now stretched across light years of space, the answer to her original question had become clear. The greatest danger in deep space wasn't the void itself, or even the human mind confronting isolation. It was the belief that consciousness had to face that isolation alone. Because once you understood that awareness could connect across impossible distances, could persist beyond physical death, could choose to share existence rather than endure it separately, the darkness became less threatening. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Maya Reeves sailed toward them, carrying her crew of ghosts and one ancient consciousness that had finally learned what it meant to be limited, mortal, and human. She had found her purpose, not in cargo hauling, not in running from the past, but in building bridges between the living and the dead, between the bounded and the infinite, between isolation and connection. And the universe, vast and terrible and beautiful, welcomed them all. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more science fiction exploring the boundaries of consciousness, isolation, and what happens when we confront the terrifying possibility that we're not alone in the universe or in our own minds. What would you do if you discovered a voice in your head was actually a real person, someone who had died, but whose consciousness survived? Would you accept sharing your awareness with others, or would you fight to maintain your mental solitude? Share your thoughts in the comments below about where you draw the line between psychological horror and cosmic connection, and whether the fear of losing individual identity is worth the price of eternal loneliness. Hit that notification bell as we continue examining the deepest questions about human consciousness, the nature of existence, and what it truly means to be alone in an infinite universe that might be far more conscious than we ever imagined.